Imagine this. A warm Friday evening. You're in this upscale restaurant, right? Place is filled with the gentle hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and then suddenly a really jarring shift. You've got one unassuming waitress, there's a grand piano tucked away in the corner, and then there's this one just incredibly arrogant millionaire.
Okay.
And what starts out as this, well, cruel, very public attempt to humiliate her, it turns into this moment that just completely silenced the room. Shattered egos, redefined everything for her, really.
Wow.
You won't believe the sheer power of how she flipped the script, basically, with nothing but her raw, undeniable talent. It was meant to be some petty revenge, designed to make her feel small.
Right.
But it became this stunning surprise for everyone involved, a real masterclass in resilience and just the power of a single pivotal moment.
That's right. And this deep dive is really all about unpacking that truly captivating story. We've drawn it from multiple YouTube transcripts, which actually gives us a pretty layered perspective on this powerful moment of unexpected triumph. And we're not just, relaying the facts here. Our real mission today is to dissect what makes this narrative so incredibly compelling.
Right. The storytelling itself.
Exactly. We'll be focusing on the craft, how this anecdote immediately hooks you, how it masterfully builds that tension, delivers a powerful, unforgettable climax, and then ultimately leaves you with these profound, lasting insights. Insights about, well, human nature and perseverance. And just for clarity, throughout this deep dive, we'll refer to our protagonist as Deborah, the arrogant millionaire, let's call him Leonard, and the restaurant will be LaFontaine.
Got it.
This story, it truly is a masterclass in how a seemingly simple anecdote can resonate so deeply, so widely, offering lessons far beyond just the specific event itself.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this then. Get ready to explore a story that's, well, it's less about a performance on a piano, really, and much more about pure, unyielding resilience. We're going to witness firsthand how just one single act of courage, especially in the face of humiliation like that, can absolutely redefine someone's path. And, importantly, how the careful construction of a narrative can really amplify that impact. So to really immerse ourselves in this story, we have to start by setting the scene. You need that strong narrative hook. Picture it vividly. It's a warm Friday evening at LaFontaine.
Okay.
This upscale restaurant, nestled right in the heart of Raleigh, North Carolina. The air is alive with this, sophisticated energy, that gentle, almost orchestral hum of conversations.
Yeah, you can almost hear it.
The delicate, rhythmic clinking of glasses and the soft, almost imperceptible footsteps of servers just gliding across these polished floors.
Right.
And there's this faint, melodious strain of jazz drifting from a grand piano tucked into a corner. It really adds to this atmosphere of refined indulgence.
It paints a picture.
Totally. It's a place where elegance isn't just displayed, it's felt.
Okay.
A relaxed vibe permeates every interaction, this sort of hushed reverence for the fine dining experience. It's the kind of place where you'd expect nothing but smooth, uneventful evenings, predictable and pleasant.
Exactly. And it's into this meticulously crafted, serene backdrop that we introduce Deborah. She's our protagonist, a 25-year-old waitress. Now, on the surface, she exudes this quiet demeanor, right? A subtle grace in her movements. But if you look closely, there's an unmistakable spark in her eyes, a hint of something deeper, more vibrant maybe, than her uniform might suggest.
Okay.
To most patrons, she was simply another efficient face in uniform, moving deftly between tables, balancing trays with practiced ease, offering polite smiles. You know the type.
Sure.
But what makes her so immediately compelling, what draws us in, is the contrast the story immediately establishes.
Yeah.
The sources reveal that inside, Deborah carried dreams far, far bigger than the luxurious dining room that surrounded her.
Oh.
Her true passion wasn't serving tables, it was music.
And it's this hidden passion, isn't it? This internal world that immediately forms a powerful connection with us as listeners.
Absolutely.
We learned that ever since she was a child, the piano had been her refuge. Like a sacred space where she could retreat and express every joy, every sorrow, every unspoken thought.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a hobby. It was like an extension of her very identity. Yet, as we all know, dreams, well, they rarely pay the bills, unfortunately.
A harsh reality.
Exactly. The harsh reality for Deborah was that working these long, demanding shifts at LaFontaine was a necessity, a practical step toward something more. It was her stepping stone, you could say, toward the music academy she longed to attend, a crucial bridge between her current reality and her artistic aspirations. But the tragedy, the quiet heartbreak, was that few people knew about her incredible talent. Only a handful of the restaurant's staff occasionally caught her stealing these fleeting moments at the old upright piano tucked away in the back room during her breaks, just savoring those precious seconds of pure musical expression.
Wow, just stealing moments.
Yeah. And this stark contrast between her daily reality, the grind of waiting tables, and her hidden profound passion immediately draws you in. It makes her instantly relatable and creates this foundational empathy. You find yourself rooting for her before the real conflict even begins.
It's that precise, poignant contrast between her outward appearance and her inner world that truly begins to build our narrative hook. It gets us invested in Deborah's journey.
Right.
And just as we're settling into her story, boom, the disruptive force arrives, the antagonist. He enters dramatically. Leonard Grayson. That night, as the initial dinner rush began to settle into a steady hum, the grand doors of LaFontaine swung open. In walked Leonard. Now, this wasn't just any wealthy entrepreneur. He was instantly recognizable. Made an entrance like he owned the very air he breathed.
Oh, boy.
Flanked by equally polished, though somewhat less imposing companions, Leonard just exuded this undeniable air of superiority. His very posture, the way he held his head, the imperious sweep of his gaze across the room, it all screamed arrogance.
You know the type.
Oh, yeah. He was notorious. Known for his sharp tongue, his cutting wit, and a clear penchant for spectacle. He was the kind of man who seemed to thrive on pushing people's buttons, on making them squirm.
Ugh.
His presence alone made even the most seasoned staff stand straighter. A collective ripple of apprehension just moved through the room. Deborah's colleagues exchanged these knowing glances, a silent acknowledgement. Leonard was not an easy guest.
No kidding.
He was, as our sources put it, the kind of customer no one wished to serve, and making others uncomfortable seemed to be one of his most indulged hobbies.
And the initial interaction, it immediately sets up that brewing conflict, doesn't it?
Right away.
Deborah, though, initially she just saw him as another table to manage in a long night's work. Just a fleeting challenge amidst a sea of diners. But this was definitely not going to be a normal evening.
Not at all.
As Leonard scanned the elegant room, his gaze, sharp and analytical, it lands on Deborah. There was something about her quiet composure, maybe her understated grace, that seemed to catch his attention. His scrutiny led to this momentary pause, a subtle narrowing of his eyes. And then, followed by this slow, knowing smirk that was just deeply unsettling.
Ominous.
Totally. Deborah, with her practiced professionalism, she felt the immediate weight of his stare, this strange pressure. But she instinctively tried to brush it off. Channeling her focus instead on the familiar grounding tasks of refilling water glasses, clearing plates, determined to maintain her professional composure despite the unsettling energy radiating from his table.
But Leonard wasn't done with her. Not by a long shot. The sources make it undeniably clear he hadn't just noticed her. He had already decided right then in that moment that she was going to be his entertainment for the night.
Oh, it's calculated.
Very. And this quick establishment of a serene, refined setting, the immediate intro of Deborah, this relatable protagonist filled with quiet dreams and resilience, and then the swift, almost theatrical arrival of a clearly antagonistic character like Leonard, it immediately creates an incredibly powerful narrative hook.
Yeah, you're drawn right in.
Absolutely. The tension is palpable from that very first glance. From the moment his gaze lands on her and he quietly forms his cruel intention. It's an effective storytelling technique. You, the listener, are instantly curious and invested, wondering with bated breath what will unfold between these two starkly contrasting figures.
You know something's coming.
Instinctively that something significant is coming, even if Deborah herself isn't yet fully aware of the storm gathering around her. This sets the stage perfectly for a classic confrontation, one that pits quiet dignity against just overt disdain.
Okay, so to deepen our connection to Deborah and to really understand the stakes of this looming confrontation, the narrative then takes us into her past. It reveals the humble origins that shaped her and fueled her quiet passion.
Right, adding that depth.
We learned she grew up in a small town in rural South Carolina, a place where, dreams of grandeur often felt as distant and unattainable as the stars twinkling in the vast night sky. Her mother was a single parent, a tireless caregiver, a nurse who worked double shifts, sacrificing endlessly just to ensure Deborah and her siblings had food on the table, a roof over their heads.
Wow. Tough upbringing.
Yeah, but despite their modest means, music had always been a constant. Like a shimmering glimmer of sparkle against the ordinary wall of their lives, providing joy and escape.
Absolutely. And that's a classic narrative technique, right?
Well,
Build empathy by showing the character's roots, the source of their core strength.
exactly.
Her mother's old, worn vinyl records and this out-of-tune piano, a generous gift from a kindly neighbor. They weren't just objects, they were the very seeds of Deborah's profound love for melody.
Ah,
That piano, despite its imperfections, became her most cherished escape, her refuge from the everyday struggles. While other kids played outside, Deborah spent countless solitary hours teaching herself to play.
self-taught.
Mostly, yeah. She started by mimicking catchy songs she heard on the radio, fingers fumbling at first, then growing more confident. Soon she ventured into the complex world of classical pieces, poring over these dog-eared secondhand music books, deciphering the notes and rhythms with sheer self-taught determination.
Incredible dedication.
It really was. And her talent didn't go unnoticed. She played at church, school recitals, community events. It was clear to everyone who heard her that she possessed this rare innate gift.
Yeah.
But recognition, while validating, couldn't mask the looming financial hurdles. By the time she turned 18, the harsh reality was stark. A professional music career, with its expensive lessons in conservatories, would simply have to wait.
Ah, that's tough.
Scholarships didn't come through. Family responsibilities, especially her mother's escalating medical bills, took precedence. Deborah, with this quiet resignation, packed away her concert ambitions, replacing them with the practicality of earning a living. Yet she couldn't entirely give up. The piano was more than a dream. It was her identity, a core part of her soul. So when she moved to Raleigh a few years ago, she specifically sought a job at LaFontaine.
Not just for the pay.
Not just for the pay, but because of the grand piano tucked conspicuously into the corner of the restaurant. Even though she rarely had the time or energy to play during her shifts, just knowing it was there, like a silent promise, gave her this profound sense of comfort. A reminder that music hadn't left her. It was simply waiting for its moment to reemerge.
Wow.
And this deep backstory adds incredible depth, doesn't it? It makes her current struggles and aspirations deeply relatable, laying the groundwork for why her decision to play will be so incredibly impactful later on.
And now with this understanding of Deborah's inner world, the antagonist's actions, Leonard's actions, they take on even greater significance.
Absolutely. He's not just being rude to a stranger now.
Yeah, exactly. Leonard, with his usual bravado, was clearly escalating the stakes. That night, as he and his entourage settled at their prominent table, Deborah approached, balancing a tray with practiced grace, a picture of quiet professionalism.
Okay.
Leonard immediately ordered a top-shelf scotch, his voice loud, and cracked a joke designed to be heard by nearby tables, explicitly drawing attention to himself and his party.
Making a scene already.
Right. Deborah, accustomed to demanding patrons, offered a polite smile, her voice steady despite the strange, unsettling energy radiating from him. Deborah, huh? Leonard said, his gaze lingering on her name tag. Sounds like someone with a lot of hidden talents.
Condescending.
Totally. He shared a knowing grin with his companion, a dismissive chuckle following his words. While the comment caught her off guard, a slight tightening in her jaw, she merely nodded politely and stepped away, trying to dismiss it as an odd, flirtatious, or perhaps just boorish remark. She didn't notice the way his eyes followed her every move, dissecting her, already plotting. This, we see, was just the subtle opening act of his calculated performance, a narrative foreshadowing of something more insidious.
Indeed. The sources describe how Leonard wasn't just observing. He was meticulously planning his next move, setting up the narrative dominoes for a public spectacle.
Right.
The night carried on with the usual hum of laughter and silverware, the soft clinking echoing through the elegant space. Deborah kept her pace steady, moving with purpose between tables, instinctively trying to avoid Leonard's piercing gaze.
Trying to lay low.
Exactly. She had dealt with difficult customers before, demanding, impatient, even rude. But something about him felt different. It wasn't just simple rudeness. It was a deliberate, calculated malevolence. His presence loomed like a shadow over her shift, making her uneasy in a way she couldn't quite shake. A low thrum of anxiety beneath her professional composure. By the time the appetizers were served, Leonard had fully started his performance, though certainly not the kind Deborah expected or appreciated. He literally held court at his table, his bearing voice recounting exaggerated tales of his financial successes, peppering his stories with thinly veiled jabs about people he called lacking ambition.
Clearly aimed at her. or people like her.
Oh, absolutely. Clearly implying those who served him. His entourage laughed dutifully, this forced chorus of sycophants, while other diners shot annoyed glances in his direction, wishing for the return of the elegant piece. This public display, this deliberate disruption of the restaurant's ambiance, perfectly set the stage for his direct, humiliating confrontation with Deborah.
And that confrontation arrived with just cruel precision. As Deborah returned to his table with a chilled bottle of wine, ready to refill glasses, Leonard caught her completely off guard.
Okay, here it comes.
He stopped her, mid-pour, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with a sudden, jarring clarity. "Tell me, Deborah," he began, his tone dripping with feigned interest, but his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "What do you do when you're not carrying plates? Surely a young woman like you has dreams."
Oh, the condescension again.
Right. Deborah hesitated, caught in the sudden spotlight of his attention. She knew she had to respond, but she wanted to deflect, to escape. So she gave this careful, soft answer, hoping to make him lose interest. "I play piano sometimes," she admitted, almost a whisper, her eyes avoiding his.
Just trying to end it.
But instead of dismissing it, Leonard's eyes lit up, a sly, predatory smile curling across his lips.
A pianist, huh? How fascinating. Why don't you give us a little performance? There's a piano right there. This was it. The moment of the public challenge. The trap sprung.
Deborah froze, the wine bottle poised in her hand. The entire room seemed to quiet, as if the very air absorbed the weight of his audacious words. Her mind raced, a scramble of fear and indignation.
What did you even do there? Exactly. Oh, I couldn't, she said quickly, forcing this nervous, brittle laugh, attempting to dismiss it. I'm just here to work tonight. But Leonard wasn't about to let it go.
Of course not.
Nonsense, he declared, his voice booming across the dining room, ensuring everyone within earshot heard his pronouncement. There's a piano right there in the corner. Show us what you've got. Surely a future star like you isn't afraid of a little audience.
Piling it on.
His companions chuckled, clearly enjoying the spectacle unfolding before them, and other diners, drawn by the commotion, turned their heads, their expressions a mix of curiosity, discomfort, and expectation.
All eyes on her.
All eyes on her. Deborah's chest tightened, a cold knot of fear forming in her stomach. She could feel the heat of their stares, the silent judgment waiting to unfold. Every fiber of her being screamed to say no, to walk away, to simply disappear.
But you can't really, can you?
Not easily. Leonard's challenge hung in the air like a dare, daring her to rise to it or crumble under its immense weight. She stammered, her gaze darting around for a sympathetic face, for some form of support, but even her colleagues seemed hesitant to intervene, caught between loyalty and the desire to avoid Leonard's wrath.
And then came the final, brutal cut. The line designed to just break her resolve. Leonard leaned back in his chair, a picture of self-satisfied cruelty, sipping his scotch with a smug, almost lazy smirk.
Ah, I see,
he drawled mockingly, his voice just loud enough to carry. All talk, no talent, that's disappointing.
Wow, that's low.
The words hit Deborah like a physical slap, burning her cheeks with a sudden rush of heat, her hands clenched at her side, her nails digging into her palms. She wasn't one to seek confrontation, to make a scene, but the sheer arrogance of his dismissal, the way he reduced her, like she was a mere joke, a nobody, it cut deeper than she could have ever expected.
It's personal now.
It was a direct assault on her very identity, on the quiet dreams she harbored. And then, this memory, a phantom comfort, as her mother's voice echoed with quiet strength in her mind. "Never let anyone make you small, Deborah. You're bigger than they'll ever know."
Powerful anchor.
A moment of profound, charged silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Deborah's eyes, now resolute, glanced at the elegant grand piano, then back at Leonard. His smug expression dared her to take the bait, dared her to prove him right.
The decision point.
And against every fiber of her better judgment, against the fear that still gnawed at her, she did. "Fine," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, though low. A quiet defiance. "I'll play."
Chills.
This entire section just masterfully builds the narrative arc, doesn't it? Demonstrating how powerful provocation can drive a character's decision. The deep, relatable backstory, combined with Leonard's persistent, public taunts, systematically escalates the tension. That cutting line, "all talk, no talent," is the absolute narrative trigger.
It forces her hand.
Exactly. Forcing Deborah to a definitive, courageous choice, creating immense anticipation for the climax. You, the listener, you are on the absolute edge of your seat, just waiting to see what she'll do, what form her retaliation will take. Okay, so the air in the room practically bristled with anticipation. Every single eye in LaFontaine was fixed on Deborah as she walked toward that piano.
The walk of defiance.
Right. each step carrying the palpable weight of both profound fear and defiant resolve. The dining room seemed to hold its breath, a collective stillness falling over the diners as she approached the gleaming grand instrument. This magnificent ebony beast waiting to be tamed. The soft, elegant glow of the chandelier above cast this direct, almost theatrical spotlight on her, isolating her from the murmuring crowd, making her the undeniable singular center of attention.
Wow.
Her fingers, despite her outward calm, trembled ever so slightly as she slid onto the polished bench. The keys, this expanse of black and white, gleamed under the light, a challenge waited to be met, a stage set for an unexpected drama.
And Leonard.
Behind her, Leonard leaned back in his chair, the picture of smug satisfaction. A preemptive smirk on his face, as though he had already won whatever cruel game he was playing. Deborah closed her eyes for just a fleeting moment, steadying her breath, pulling deep into her core. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely think, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. This wasn't the familiar, comforting setting of a church recital or those cozy community gatherings she'd once known.
No, this was a hostel.
This was different. This was hostile, a public crucible. But there was no turning back now. The silence was absolute.
And that silence, that moment of suspended animation, it's so crucial to the narrative's power, isn't it?
Totally.
It highlights the immense pressure she's under and makes the subsequent unveiling of her talent even more impactful. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool, smooth surface beneath her fingertips, that familiar comfort amidst the alien hostility. The first notes she played were soft, hesitant, almost fragile, like a tentative whisper escaping into the vast, tranquil room. A few diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone coughed discreetly in the back, perhaps anticipating a faltering performance.
Right, maybe expecting the worst.
Exactly. But Deborah ignored them, her focus sharpening with each note as she leaned into the music, letting it consume her. She chose a piece she knew by heart, a soulful, achingly beautiful rendition of Clair de Lune by Debussy.
Beautiful choice.
The melody, ethereal and deeply moving, spilled into the room, weaving through the hushed air like a delicate but unyielding thread. It had this gentle, flowing quality of a shy stream, quietly twining its way into the light, growing bolder as it found its course. And as her initial nervousness began to dissipate, as her confidence blossomed, the music swelled, the warm, expressive phrases expanding into greater textures and intensities, filling every corner of the vast dining room. Her hands moved with an effortless grace that completely belied the emotional chaos raging inside her.
That internal struggle.
Yeah, the internal struggle for self-control and the defiant assertion of her true worth. The notes poured out of her, raw and unfiltered, like a confession. Each chord seemed to carry a piece of her life's story. The immense sacrifices her mother had made, the lonely nights she spent practicing in a cramped room, the heavy weight of dreams deferred but never, ever abandoned.
Wow.
It was raw, genuine, pure emotion, everything she couldn't possibly put into words, communicated through the universal language of music.
The transformation in the room must have been astonishing. A palpable shift in energy.
Completely.
The incessant chatter that had filled the restaurant just moments ago now dissipated into an utter, profound stillness. The diners fell completely silent. Their earlier conversations, their clinking glasses, replaced by this collective quiet, a shared reverence.
Even Leonard.
Even Leonard, who'd been whispering audibly to his companions, his smirk a permanent fixture, went absolutely quiet, his expression unreadable. Deborah didn't need to look at him to feel the profound shift in the room, the complete reversal of the power dynamic.
The tables turned.
Absolutely. The mocking energy, the air of derision that had permeated his corner had entirely dissipated. Replaced by something she couldn't quite name, perhaps awe, perhaps humility, maybe even a subdued, reluctant respect. The music soared, a living, breathing entity filling the space, and Deborah, immersed in its depths, let herself go completely. For the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a struggling dreamer. She was simply herself, an artist. Unbound by expectations or limitations.
Finding her freedom in the music.
Her fingers danced across the keys, a blur of motion, drawing out emotions so raw and vivid they seemed to hang in the air like shimmering smoke, clinging to every velvet curtain and crystal chandelier. By the time she struck the final resonant chord, the room was utterly, breathtakingly still.
Wow.
For a long, lingering moment, there was no sound at all, just the lingering resonance of the piano. A beautiful, pregnant silence.
And that lingering silence, that moment of breath holding, that's what makes the subsequent reaction so incredibly impactful. Then, As though released from this powerful collective spell, the audience erupted into thunderous applause. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of raw emotion that reverberated off the walls, shaking the very foundations of the elegant restaurant. Filling the room with a warmth and validation Deborah hadn't dared to expect.
Goosebumps.
Some diners, overcome with emotion, stood, clapping with a fervor that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Her coworkers, who had been watching from the sidelines, their faces a mixture of anxiety and hope, now joined in, their faces lit with pride and even tears of joy. Some people openly wept, amazed and deeply moved by the unexpected beauty and power of her performance.
Incredible reaction.
But Leonard.
Leonard, however, remained conspicuously seated. His arrogant smirk was utterly gone, replaced by an expression Deborah couldn't quite decipher. Part shock, a profound surprise, part discomfort, an obvious discomfiture with being so completely and publicly wrong, and perhaps even a flicker of grudging admiration.
Interesting mix. He raised his hands and clapped slowly. A hesitant, hollow sound that was utterly dwarfed and swallowed by the thunderous cheers around him. The normally confident fellow, the man who reveled in control, seemed perhaps a tad unraveled, his composure fracturing.
Couldn't hide it.
But even his hesitant, almost obligatory applause couldn't overshadow what Deborah had just done. She had not only reclaimed her voice, she had unequivocally proved herself in such a profound way that all his previous barbs felt utterly powerless, dissolving into insignificance. No amount of condescension, no amount of petty malice could ever take that away from her now.
She won.
This section truly defines the narrative's climax, highlighting how every carefully chosen detail, from the profound choice of Claire de Lune to the detailed description of her emotionally charged playing, and the audience's profound silence followed by an explosion of appreciation, builds to a cathartic release. And the antagonist's stunned, almost reluctant reaction is critical. It marks the absolute turning point where the power dynamic irrevocably shifts, a moment of profound narrative reversal.
Okay, so as the thunderous applause began to slowly fade, the room seemed to collectively exhale, right? A release of shared emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah slowly stood, her knees still trembling slightly, that residual effect of adrenaline and emotion. But her back was straight, her head held a little higher than before. There was this newfound poise in her posture.
A change.
Definitely. She glanced around the room, and for the first time that evening, she truly saw the people watching her. Not as detached spectators, but as deeply moved witnesses to her triumph. Their expressions now carried something new. Admiration, respect, even a hint of genuine awe.
Wow.
It wasn't simple pride she felt, she realized, but a profound sense of relief. Relief that she hadn't let fear silence her. Relief that she had chosen to stand tall. She didn't look at Leonard right away. Instead, she gave this small, polite nod to the diners who had clapped the loudest, her lips curving into a faint, genuine smile. A quiet acknowledgement of their shared moment.
And then the story moves to a crucial narrative beat, the final confrontation. A true battle of wills and a reversal of fortunes. As though magnetized by an invisible force, her gaze finally shifted to Leonard. He was still seated, this lone figure amidst the lingering celebratory buzz, his hands clasped tightly in front of him on the table.
Still there?
Still there. The confident smirk he'd worn so brazenly earlier, that mask of superiority, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, his face was a mask of forced neutrality, as though he couldn't quite decide whether to admit his misstep or, in a desperate attempt to regain control, double down on his arrogance.
What did he say?
Well, Leonard finally said, his voice a little louder than it needed to be, cutting through the fragile, lingering silence that had settled over the room like a cold draft. That was unexpected, he chuckled lightly, a forced, hollow sound that entirely lacked its usual bravado.
I suppose talent really does come from the most surprising places.
Ugh, still trying to control it. Exactly. His comment landed like a dull thud in the emotionally charged air, a feeble attempt to regain control of the narrative. His companions exchanged awkward glances, clearly unsure whether to offer a dutiful laugh or remain silent in discomfort. Deborah tilted her head slightly, studying him, her expression calm, unreadable. His words were meant to be an olive branch, a grudging compliment, but they were hollow, weighed down by his evident inability to truly own the moment, to genuinely concede his defeat.
Deborah's response, though, powerful precisely in its calm, unwavering strength. A perfect narrative counterpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, she said, her tone steady and deliberate, devoid of any emotional excess. There was no warmth in her voice, but critically, no hostility either. She wasn't about to let him pull her back into the smallness he'd tried so hard to impose.
Standing her ground.
Her performance had spoken louder than any rebuttal she could have offered, and she knew it. Leonard cleared his throat, a nervous, almost pathetic sound, clearly uncomfortable under the unwavering weight of the room's collective gaze, which now felt like an accusation.
Yeah, everyone's watching him now.
He gestured toward the waiter for another drink, a flimsy, transparent attempt to regain his composure, to hide behind the rituals of his wealth. "You've got quite a gift," he added, almost begrudgingly, as if forcing the words out against his will.
And this is where Deborah delivers the perfect narrative mic drop moment, a statement that resonates far beyond the immediate exchange.
Okay.
Deborah nodded once, her gaze unwavering, holding his. "Everyone has a gift," she said. The weight of her words deliberate, profound, and utterly pointed. It's how you choose to use it that matters.
Oof, perfect.
The room seemed to hold its breath again, but this time in a different kind of awe. The subtle sting of her response rippling through the air like a perfectly struck chord. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was enough. It was everything.
Wow.
Leonard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his usual air of dominance slipping further with each passing second, visibly crumbling under the weight of her quiet dignity. The diners, now feeling a sense of closure, began to slowly turn their attention back to their meals, though the energy in the room had shifted entirely.
Yeah, the vibe changed.
Where there had once been the quiet hum of privilege and pretense, there was now something richer. A shared understanding, a collective appreciation, perhaps even profound respect for the waitress who had reminded everyone of the undeniable power of authenticity. Leonard wasn't just humiliated, he was exposed. His true character laid bare for all to see.
No coming back from that.
The bravado that once filled their corner of the restaurant had utterly evaporated, leaving only an awkward, uncomfortable silence in its wake. His once commanding presence, the aura of power he projected, was reduced to an awkward shuffle, a visible sign of his complete defeat.
So, as Deborah finally stepped away from the piano, the full weight of the moment settling in her chest, she returned to her station. Her colleagues greeted her with these quiet smiles and subtle nods of encouragement, their eyes reflecting a shared victory.
Nice. Team Deborah.
Totally. Leonard's table had quieted completely. His entourage, who had laughed so freely at her expense earlier, now avoided eye contact, their conversation subdued and fractured.
Oh.
Very. The rest of the night continued its usual rhythm, but Deborah felt lighter, a profound sense of liberation. Each step she took through the dining room felt more purposeful, her confidence blooming in a way she hadn't expected, a quiet strength radiating from her.
Mm-hmm.
As she refilled glasses and cleared plates, patrons, one by one, stopped her to offer genuine, heartfelt, kind words. "You're incredible," one older woman said softly, her eyes moist. "I don't think I've ever heard anything so moving."
Wow.
Another man, looking genuinely impressed, added, "Keep going. You've got something special. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Deborah thanked them with quiet humility, her heart swelling with a gratitude that went far beyond mere compliments. These weren't just words. They were validation.
A real validation.
Validations of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of becoming, finally given voice.
Leonard, however, was not one for gracious defeat, not surprisingly. As Deborah approached his table to deliver the check, he looked up at her with an expression that clearly teetered between raw annoyance and a reluctant, begrudging admiration he couldn't quite suppress.
Still processing.
"You've made your point," he said, his tone clipped, laced with a thin layer of irritation. "No need to rub it in."
Oh, come on.
Deborah paused, meeting his gaze directly, her calm demeanor, a stark contrast to his irritation. "It was never about proving anything to you," she replied, her voice calm but firm. A final, unshakable assertion of her truth. "I just wanted to play."
Perfect response.
Leonard had absolutely no response to this. No clever retort, no cutting remark. He simply fidgeted with his drink, his once commanding presence reduced to that awkward shuffle. The power dynamic had shifted completely and irrevocably, and every person at that table, and indeed many in the room, knew it. As Leonard scribbled his signature on the check, one of his companions, a younger man with a softer demeanor than the rest, looked at Deborah and said, almost apologetically, "You were amazing, truly." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of genuine humanity in a group she had initially written off as entirely shallow. "Thank you," she replied, offering a small, genuine smile before walking away from the table for the very last time.
Nice little moment there.
The night ended with Leonard and his group leaving quietly. Their usual grand exit, typically a spectacle of their own making, replaced by a hasty, almost ashamed retreat. Deborah watched them go, feeling neither triumph nor bitterness. She wasn't thinking about Leonard anymore. Her mind was already on the next step, the possibilities now unfolding before her.
And the tangible rewards from that night were immediate and, well, wonderfully significant.
Good, she deserved it.
The tips from that evening were unusually generous, far more than she typically earned, enough to comfortably cover her rent and even leave a little extra for piano lessons she'd been postponing for years, a dream that now felt within reach.
Yeah.
As she locked up LaFontaine, the crisp night air filling her lungs, a deep sense of peace settled over Deborah. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, perhaps ever. Certainty.
Certainty. That's powerful.
She wasn't just a waitress, diligently earning a living. And she wasn't just a dreamer, harboring secret hopes. She was an artist, undeniably and irrevocably. And nothing, not mocking words, not financial struggles, not even the insidious whisper of self-doubt could ever take that truth away from her. But as she walked home, her thoughts weren't fixated on the night's conflict or Leonard's humiliation. They were soaring towards the future, where her long-deferred dreams finally felt closer, more real than ever before. This moment of personal validation, driven by authentic expression, is really a core part of what makes this narrative so compelling.
And this is where the lasting impact of such a powerful narrative truly shines. In the days that followed, the events at LaFontaine became something of a local legend, a quiet sensation. The patrons who had witnessed her breathtaking performance shared the tale, retelling it with a sense of wonder, and word of the waitress who silenced the millionaire began to spread like wildfire throughout Raleigh.
Love that title.
Then, a few days later, in a pivotal narrative turn, Deborah received a life-changing call. It was from a man who had been dining that night, a music producer visiting from Nashville who had been captivated by her talent.
Wow.
Yeah. He wasn't offering overnight fame or guaranteed fortune, but a concrete chance to record demo, a tangible, professional step towards something she had only dared to dream of in her most private moments.
That's amazing.
Deborah agreed, not out of a belief that it would magically change her life overnight, but because it felt like a door opening, a clear pathway, one she was no longer afraid to walk through.
Right.
For years, she had let fear and doubt whisper lies into her mind, telling her she wasn't enough, that her dreams were too big, too impractical. But now, she saw the profound truth. Resilience and authenticity were her greatest strengths, far more valuable than any outward validation. The incident with Leonard Grayson wasn't just a humiliating spectacle-turned-victory. It was a powerful, undeniable reminder of the power of integrity and self-belief. Leonard, for all his wealth and bravado, for all his attempts to diminish her, ultimately had nothing that could diminish her true worth. He represented every voice of doubt she had ever faced, every external and internal barrier, and she silenced him with nothing but the purity of her craft. Her journey was far from over, but for the very first time, it felt like it had truly, authentically begun.
What a turning point.
And for anyone who hears her story, Deborah's message becomes incredibly clear and universally applicable. Never ever let someone else define your worth. The world is full of Leonard Grayson's people who project their own insecurities onto others to feel powerful. But true power, lasting power, comes from staying rooted in who you are, from nurturing your authentic self and letting your passion speak louder than any ridicule, louder than any attempt to make you small. Hashtag tag outro.
So what does this all mean for us, really? This deep dive into a single extraordinary night at a restaurant shows us in vivid detail how one moment of challenge, one public dare, can become this incredible catalyst for profound personal transformation and widespread inspiration.
Yeah, it really resonates.
It highlights the core themes we've explored today. The triumph of authenticity over pretense, the incredible unyielding power of resilience in the face of adversity, and how true strength often lies in simply being yourself, especially when others try to diminish you. It's a powerful testament to the idea that your greatest talent might just be waiting for the right moment, or maybe the wrong person, to truly reveal itself.
And this raises an important question for you, our listener, to maybe ponder. What about you? What dream have you been holding back on because of fear or doubt? Or perhaps because of a critical voice, internal or external?
Good question.
Don't wait for someone like Leonard to test you, to push you to your breaking point. Perhaps this story encourages you to take that courageous step forward now, to let your own hidden talents, your own passions speak for themselves. What might your Claire de Lune moment be, the one where you surprise everyone, including yourself?